watching closely.
What's the secret, Max?
You just gotta find something you love to do and then do it for the rest of your life.
I don't want to be a product of my environment. I want my environment to be a product of me.
Hello, and welcome to the Establishing Shot, a podcast where we do deep dives into directors and their filmographies. I am here back again, ready to get going with the podcast again. Took a long extended break between the Christmas draft and Christmas movie draft we did. That was really fun. And it took a long break for the holidays and kind of the beginning of the year, just getting back into the swing of things before I jump back into the podcast. So, I appreciate all the listeners jumping back in with us here. And I really wanted to do this podcast last year, and it just didn't work out. Just scheduling didn't work out. So we're going to start the year with episode 30. This is the 30th episode, which is pretty exciting. And so we're going to be doing the Wes Anderson shorts. So this is something that I'm going to be doing periodically. I might do some like in between series, or maybe some in the middle of series. If a director I've covered has a new movie come out, then I want to cover those movies too. So we're going to cover the 4 Wes Anderson shorts that came out on Netflix last year. Those include The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar, which was kind of the flagship short of the 4, and then the 3 shorter ones, which were The Swan, The Ratcatcher, and Poison. And so, we're going to be covering all 4 of those, kind of a package deal today. I have back on my brother-in-law, Chase. Hello. Yeah, Chase is here in the room with me.
Yes.
It's always fun to do a kind of in person. When we did that last time when we covered Isle of Dogs, mm-hmm. And I think that's the only in person one I've done with you. All the other episodes are kind of over video, and so. We did Isle of Dogs. That was fun. And so he's jumping back in with me to do the Wes Anderson shorts to kick off the year. And I'm excited.
I am too.
Yeah. Did you had you heard about these before they came out?
I had. I'd heard about them a while, I guess, whenever they had first gone into development and it had come out. Mm-hmm. I had heard about it, and then I had kind of completely forgotten about them.
Yeah.
And then whenever it finally came around to them coming out, I think you had brought it up to me probably.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, I remember hearing that he was doing more Roald Dahl stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a weird thing. So Asteroid City came out over the summer. And then as the year kept going, it's, the news came out, oh, these are going to drop on Netflix. And then they dropped on Netflix, and really the people that were looking for them mm-hmm. and anticipating them probably jumped on right away. But I feel like they kind of got buried.
Yeah, I don't remember. It seems like it took a while before I was hearing anything about them.
Yeah. It's like they got buried in Netflix's algorithm, which is very unfortunate. Because as we talk about this, I think these are really phenomenal.
I think so too. They're a lot of fun.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about these Wes Anderson shorts. Chase introduced himself on the Isle of Dogs podcast. So if you want to hear more about Chase, then you can go listen to that one.
Fair enough.
So we'll just kind of jump right in. I was really looking forward to this. It's funny. I had gotten this Wes Anderson film studies notebook, So I've gotten these for all the directors that I've done so far. I've been lucky that the guy that makes these, like, has a bunch of directors that he makes them for, but not all of them. So I've been lucky to get those. And it already actually had the Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar, like, listed as one of the movies within the journal.
Oh, cool.
So obviously this has kind of been anticipated for a long time. But we kind of have talked about in past episodes, especially obviously the Fantastic Mr. Fox episode, that, you know, Wes Anderson has always been a huge fan of Roald Dahl books and stories. And he talked about in interviews that he, you know, read these stories that he made into movies, especially the Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar, I think, is one that really stood out to him. You know, he read these as a kid, and he kind of talked about how Roald Dahl, he felt like, always had the ability to write stories that have, like, ideas that kind of stick in your mind. And I think that's true. I think too, like, on adding on to that, Roald Dahl, the few stories I've read, at least, they don't just have ideas that stick in your head, but they have, like, visuals that stick in your head.
They do, yeah. He's a very vivid writer.
Yes. Like, even in his descriptions of characters, you know, he's very, like, detailed and kind of explaining what they look like and their mannerisms even. And so you can really, like, picture the things he's talking about in your head. So yeah, it's like these ideas and visuals stick in your head. So I can see how, like, if you grew up reading Dahl and then you become a filmmaker, you have these, like, visuals
just kind of burned in your brain from when you're a child.
Yeah. And you're like, man, I've got to get this on screen. These visuals that are, like, burned in my brain is a good way to put it. But this one in particular, Wes actually had the rights to the Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar for, like, 10 years. So when he made Fantastic Mr. Fox, he went to, you know, their house and saw, like, Dahl's writing hut, and met with his wife. Is it Lissy? Is that how you say her?
I think so.
Nickname? It's like Liccy. I think I would say Lissy, but
I'm not exactly sure either.
I don't think they're Italian. They're British, so I don't think it's Licci.
No.
But yeah, so but yeah, he met her and they kind of, like, hit it off, I think, is kind of how it seems.
Right. I think that he kind of became friends with the grandson too.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't know that, but yeah. So when Fantastic Mr. Fox came out, she loved it, obviously, and she had asked him, like, hey, are there any other ones that you really like or want to make? And back then he had mentioned the Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar to her. And so she set it aside for him. So, like, I want to say I read that, like, other people have tried to, like, get that, but the Wes had owned the rights. She had, like, set it aside specifically for him for all that time.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. But yeah, in an interview, he was asked, you know, why did it take you so long to make this? And he said, this is a quote. He said, "I never knew how to do it. I just didn't see a way for me to do it that isn't in his personal voice. The way he tells the story is part of what I like about it." And so he, you know, he went on to kind of say, like, he was just struggling with, like, how do I make this? It's so much in his voice is so vital to, like, the story and the way it sounds and feels. And so he just finally decided, well, I guess we'll just make the movie in his voice.
Yeah.
Literally, like, basically reading the Dahl story word for word, for a lot of, I mean, really, like, it pretty much is the Dahl story.
Right.
You know, the each one is kind of like different amounts of exactly the story, but they're all pretty close.
They are all pretty close.
I know me and Chase both read all 4 short stories in preparation for this, which I enjoyed. I enjoyed reading those.
I did too.
Yeah, they were all, obviously well written and engaging, and yeah,
and it really is remarkable how I don't know how much the experience of the movies is like reading the books in a way.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's and we'll get more into that later. I don't want to spoil anything, but yeah, so I just love that he was like, well, since I can't think of a good way to make this, let's just make it in Dahl's voice and have the actors read the story. And so he got to thinking like they were making Henry Sugar, or he was planning it and stuff, it kind of like pre-production, I guess. And it got to a point where he was like, this is not going to be long. I can't make it any longer than it is. Because I think, I assume like the original plan was to make it a feature. And he just couldn't make it work as a feature. So he's like, well, it is what it is. I'm going to make it, and it's going to be this. It's going to be, I think it ends up being like 37 minutes or something like that.
That sounds right.
And, but he wanted to do something that I guess maybe added up to a feature. And so he was like, well, let's make a few more shorter ones. And so he started like kind of searching through and trying to figure out, okay, which of like Dahl's stories kind of work in this kind of like format. And he came down to those other three, Swan, Ratcatcher, and Poison. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you watch them and you're like, yeah, these all work in this sort of voice and format.
They do.
And so he had mentioned another one too that was like a companion of the Ratcatcher. I think it was called The Hitchhiker, which I haven't read.
I know the one you're talking about. I think it's I actually when I found out about it earlier today, and it just immediately went and listened to it. It's
oh, so you did listen to it?
I did.
Nice.
Rummins.
Okay. Yeah. It's he said he liked it too, but it kind of felt too familiar, I guess is the way he put it.
It's a much more normal story, I will say, than the other. And not that it's not that it doesn't have like any like weird qualities to it, but It's a very it's a bit more tropey, I suppose.
I gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that kind of adds up. That matches up to what he said. Then that makes sense. Like it was too familiar. But yeah, that's kind of like the I guess background history of how this all got started. I do know too, like he's someone said somewhere in something I was reading that he drew like cartoons, like cartoonized versions of these, which is pretty common for Wes films. He storyboards everything. So I can imagine that's probably what they meant by that, was like he storyboarded out like everything, which you would kind of have to
especially for these.
Yeah. But yeah, I did write down some of his crew names that if you listen to the Wes Anderson series, you might recognize. With one being Bob Yeoman, he's the cinematographer for actually not all four of them, because I was looking earlier today. Roman Coppola, who's done a lot of like co-writing with Wes. He did the cinematography for the Swan, I think. Yeah, for the Swan, which I was like, oh, that's surprising. Maybe Yeoman was there, but he just didn't get the credit for it. But maybe. Yeah, I thought that was like odd, but I was like, oh, cool. I guess Coppola's like trying his hand at being a DP. So, yeah, that was cool. So Yeoman obviously has been working with Wes for forever.
Right.
And Wes wrote all of them. He has the writing credit. So really, like, I would say probably the writing is mostly just like trimming the fat of the text itself. And then like he probably did some like adjustments of the language. And then there's every once in a while, there's some there's something like different or added in.
Yeah.
It's
never much.
No, the most notable one, it's not like much content wise, but like I think the way he ends Poison is like a significant addition.
I agree.
Which we'll talk about that when we talk about Poison, but a very like taking the idea and then like kind of like making it more full, I guess. The idea that it seems like the story's trying to get to. So I did appreciate that, and it still felt like it was Dahl's voice too. Like it didn't feel like
it doesn't clash with anything.
Yeah,
in the original ending.
Yeah. So yeah, Wes with the writing credit, and obviously directed them. Adam Stockhausen was the production designer for these, and he's done other Wes stuff, Grand Budapest. I want to say French Dispatch, but I'm not sure. I know for sure he did Grand Budapest and Moonrise Kingdom. So yeah, and then there were two editors, Andrew Weisblum and Barney Pilling, and they've done kind of a similar thing. They all have like, Yeoman is just like Wes's guy. He's the DP for all of Wes's stuff since I want to say Rushmore.
Oh wow.
And which was his second film, so pretty much since the beginning. And then the other guys are kind of like maybe like 4 to 5 or 6 Wes movies a piece, so they all like have familiarity there. I didn't look up who did the music for these, which I should have. I just didn't think about it. And I'm scrolling live on air, and I am not seeing who the composer was, which is strange. I see like sound, but not a composer.
If you're looking at Henry Sugar specifically, from what I understand, I don't think there actually is music in Henry Sugar.
Oh, maybe that's
if I'm correct.
You might be. I didn't put that together watching it. And I've seen it once, and it must be that way with all of them, because there's not anyone noted as the composer for any of them that I'm seeing, which is interesting. But now that I think about it, I guess there's not really music in them. I'm just now realizing that it's all just like sound design and them like narrating these stories. Wow, that's a live discovery for that I'm making right now with everyone. But yeah, that's pretty cool. That's unusual for Wes because most of his films have a very distinct like scores.
That is true.
Yeah. And so, that's kind of his returning crew. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say that does kind of even more add to the just making a book visualness of these stories.
Yeah,
the way he's presenting them. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a lot of we'll definitely be talking more about that. But yeah, production of this, Wes said it took about 2 to 2.5 weeks of production to get these done. They did it at all 4 of them at Maidstone Studios in England.
Gotcha.
I think it's like, I don't know how far from London, but it's like kind of southeast of London, I think is what I saw. Shot it in 16 millimeter, all of them film, obviously. He loves to shoot and film.
He does.
And I did read that he said he wanted it to have the feel of a kind of a made for TV British 1980s movie or TV, which I was like, oh, okay, I guess I've never watched any 1980s British TV, so I have no reference point.
Now that you're saying that, I've seen I guess my main context is just like some old Doctor Who, but they're very they have a very set-like quality to them.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They feel very built, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Doctor Who I've never really watched any of the old Doctor Who, but I've watched the most recent iterations, and they still kind of have that feel.
They do.
It's very obvious that like there's a you're watching actors on a set sort of, which is, I would say that Wes said that for this, but that's pretty much all of Wes's stuff.
True.
Too. Yeah, he described it as a little theatrical presentation that they found a way to film, and then he described the cast as a theater company, which kind of, it seems like, oh yeah, that's unique to this, but really like, especially like the cast as a theater company, I've heard him like talk about that before, because he always like is very intentional about working with a cast and like them all working together and like living together and eating together and all that sort of stuff. So
and even though like this is several new people, like there's only a couple of returning members of the troupe, I suppose, but he also does kind of have that tendency of pulling a lot of the same people over and over that you would see with a theater company.
Yeah, and you see that in the crew. I already mentioned the crew, and we'll get to the cast in a bit, but there are some new guys with the cast, but also some returning ones, and so that's kind of, that's it brings some familiarity for sure to the set. But yeah, so I would say he's always thought of his films like that, but this definitely is explicitly like visually like a theater production.
People playing multiple roles and
and then just like the set design and all that is
the use of props and the non-use of props.
I wrote down this quote because I thought it was good. Wes Anderson, this is Wes speaking. He says, when you watch a movie, generally you're seeing someone try to create an illusion of something happening, because in fact, right off the frame is a light and a guy with a microphone. But for me, the theatrical devices really happen. So I think to some degree, I like the authenticity that a theatrical approach can bring. It's a way to tell the story where there's a little sliver of the documentary in it, even though most of what we're doing is the exact opposite of a documentary, which I appreciate. It made me think of Werner Herzog is a filmmaker. He's done both. He's done narrative and documentary work. I want to say probably his most notable narrative is Aguirre Wrath of God, probably, which is an older one, but probably like his most critically acclaimed, I would say, narrative feature. I could be wrong, but I think so. And then probably one that a lot of people would recognize is Grizzly Man, which is a relatively more recent documentary about the Grizzly Man. But Werner Herzog had this idea that he called the ecstatic truth. And so it's kind of this idea that the way he kind of describes it is that there's only like a very shallow truth in the quote unquote facts. And so like even when he makes documentary, like when he makes Grizzly Man or his other documentaries, he's less worried about like when he makes his finished product, he's less worried about portraying like quote unquote facts and trying, because he says that's only a shallow truth that you're going to find there. And so he's more interested in digging deeper into like stuff deeper than the facts, behind the facts. And so like it gets to it, it's kind of like I haven't watched much Herzog, but it makes me think of, I watched Scorsese's Rolling Thunder Review, which is a Bob Dylan kind of concert documentary following his Rolling Thunder Review tour. And there's all these talking heads of both like archive footage from that tour and also like people in the present day like talking about it. And there's like conflicting stuff being said, and like it's all like, when you finish the movie, you're like, I don't know who's telling the truth and who's not about Bob Dylan or about this tour, or I'm not sure if I can trust anything Bob Dylan said. Like, and it's because like it's not so much interested in like portraying a fact of this concert tour that Bob Dylan went on, but more interested in the deeper truth, which is that like Bob Dylan is very interested in like mythology and like legend and story. And so like he kind of builds his persona in that way. And so right. Scorsese, when he approached the movie, he's like approaching it less of like, let me portray the facts, and more of like, let me kind of portray this in the kind of rhythm or the, I guess, like atmosphere of a Bob Dylan mindset. And that's kind of like, I always think that's interesting. It's that ecstatic truth. It's the deeper truth behind the facts, that maybe like you wouldn't call a fact, but like is getting to something more true still.
Right.
And I think that's kind of like, I guess, the mindset Wes is in when he's talking about these are kind of like documentary, but kind of the opposite of documentary. Like they're portraying, like we're portraying these books, but we're like trying to get, I guess, visually to something behind just like saying, reading the book out loud and filming someone reading the book out loud. I guess that's kind of what I'm picking up on from that quote. But yeah, as far as like making the movie itself, Wes said, in order to support the storytelling, we wanted to make a kind of blocking and staging that could happen live. And like when you watch the movie, like it's happening right there in front of you. The production design is like ever changing and moving and shifting, and props are being handed in to the actors.
Walls are being taken out.
Yeah. And like, honestly, it's one of the most inventive things I've ever seen on screen. Like I don't know about you, but I've never seen anything
I haven't either
like this, like what Wes is doing in these 4 shorts. The set is moving around. It looks awesome. Like they're intricately painted or structured. He's doing like all kinds of different camera techniques. They're like projecting behind Benedict Cumberbatch, like moving through a city, and he's like walking in place in front of the back projection. Like they light stuff in interesting ways. Like I don't know. It's just
the only point of comparison I can even think of is French Dispatch, which is just Wes Anderson.
It's like he took a little bit of stuff they did in French Dispatch and just like to the nth degree.
Yeah.
And it's almost like this put in companion with Asteroid City coming out in the same year is almost like, which before I say this, Wes, I was reading in an interview actually earlier today, what the interviewer like asked him about like the kind of TikTok trend and stuff. And Wes was like, I haven't seen any of those. He's like, he mentioned the only one he had seen is like the Ritz Hotel did one. And so he saw that and he was like, oh, the Ritz kind of, they owe me a few stays. But it's almost like he's like kind of pushing, he hasn't watched them, and he's not like against them necessarily, but it's almost like, okay, y'all want to act like you can do like what I do, but here's like actually what I do. And it's incredible.
Yes.
And yeah, maybe your TikToks are fun, but what I'm doing is like incredible filmmaking and art and amazing.
Hi. Quick reminder that you can be a huge help to the production of this show. If you visit establishingshotpod.com/donate, you'll find out how to join the Establishing Shot family through some giving tiers starting as low as $5 a month. You heard that right, only $5 a month. And Not only will you be helping me keep the show going, but you'll also get some perks yourself, like early and ad-free episodes, bonus episodes, access to a Discord server where we can chat it up about the show and movies in general, and more. Might even let you choose a movie for me to review for the show. Check out that link in the show notes to learn more. Back to the show.
But yeah, it feels like you're watching a pop-up book in a sense. Like
That's yeah, I like that.
Yeah, because it's like there's even like some of the sequences where like literally like a set piece will like literally
Fold
pop
out,
up, or fold out like behind the actors, or the opposite. And it's just
There are like little I'm thinking of like a Part in Henry Sugar, but like there's little like things that rotate within the scene that change your perspective, and
yeah, and it's, I was thinking about this because if you describe these to someone, you're like, the way you would describe it is maybe like, oh well, it's the Roald Dahl short stories, and then there's someone like an actor on screen like narrating it to you, and then like kind of they're acting it out, and the sets change and stuff like that. And I guess like it's hard to describe it in a way that doesn't seem like, oh, so they're just like acting out the book for you. Like, why do I need to watch them act out the book? But and even like if you describe it, it's hard not to describe it as like kind of like a stage production kind of thing, because it very much has that feel, but it's very much like a cinematic language. It's very like it's doing things that can only be captured on camera, like that you couldn't do with a stage production. And it's almost like, if you think about some of the best like Broadway to movie, I guess adaptations are like when the director really finds a way to make it where you're like, oh, there's a reason to see this also on screen,
right?
Because of what they're doing with the camera, and not just like watching the camera kind of just like film the, film the musical on a set,
Sure.
So like, I think West Side Story, like Spielberg's West Side Story, is very much that. I think he really had an eye for, okay, how can I make this like take the stage production and make it where it's like, okay, there's something new being done because of the way I'm using the camera to film these sequences or whatever.
Right. Or like The Sound of Music. I mean, I've never seen like a good production of it, but I've seen like a really good student production of like the play, and there is something, there's something of the shot of like the Alps with her singing in the film that you just can't capture on a stage,
right?
No matter how good the production quality is going to be, that's not going to be the same.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, this is like I would say like the way that the scenes are blocked and the way the camera moves is just such a starkly cinematic experience. Like, it is like very much a stage production feel because of the sets, the set design, and like, and all like like you said, the actors are playing like maybe multiple roles even within one story, but it's such a, like, you have to watch it on the screen. Like it's very much a film experience. And Adam, I found this really cool article where Adam Stockhausen, the production designer, and even Bob Yeoman kind of interviewed, and so they pulled some quotes from them, and Stockhausen was kind of saying how he and Bob Yeoman and Wes kind of have this shorthand of communication because of working together in the past that like really helped in making this, which I'm sure was just like in a very hard feat to get made.
Sure.
But they did, he said they did a lot of modeling with like digital, I guess, like recreations and even like cardboard recreations before they went in, and then they also like would set up cameras either anywhere from like days to weeks in advance of shooting so that they can make sure everything was just right. Which, I hope if you're listening you've watched this, but if you haven't, when you see this, you're like, how much planning and rehearsal went into place, like, because everything has to move just right for it to like not be a disaster on screen.
Yeah. I remember hearing in an interview them talking about like the cameramen practicing, like for days before they even like actually brought people in to like block out the shots.
Yeah. And it's incredible. There's a ton of moving parts, and I'm sure there's a lot of like crew that's not necessarily like credited on IMDb, that like shout out to those guys,
For sure.
there's so many moving parts. I read that Yeoman actually had to order like special dolly tracks to help facilitate like the tearaway quality, which I like that phrasing too. There is like a tearaway quality to the set design, because he said this. They had to, like, these special dolly tracks helped because they had to like make holes at the bottom so that the camera could remain in place, because there's like stuff being torn away and like I guess like moving around, and so there's like some sort of special dolly track he had to order so that the camera could like not get torn away with everything else, I guess.
I guess that makes sense.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's something that like was already like, if they had to get that specially made, or if like I didn't really gather that from what I read. But maybe it was something that was already out there that they just had to order, or maybe when you say like I had to order this, it could mean that, or it could mean I had to like get someone to make this for me,
right?
Because it's not a thing. Which that might be the case, because like we said, I've never seen another movie like this.
Sure.
So who would need a dolly track like that before you're making a movie where you have to have it? It reminds me of like a lot of the innovation that like Van Hoytema did with Christopher Nolan working with IMAX cameras. Like, they had stuff like made because it didn't exist.
Yeah,
and
like
they needed it.
Like the plane wing mounts and stuff.
Yeah. And even just like, even as simple as like the harness to like handheld carry the IMAX camera.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's really cool, I think. And then Yeoman also mentioned just a ton of lighting changes. This is a quote from Yeoman. He said, when in Henry Sugar, when Benedict Cumberbatch goes from the exterior of the casino to the lobby to the interior of the gambling room, 3 distinct looks were needed, and there was a lot of dimming of lights, etc., in the course of our camera moves. And so I can only imagine, like, I don't know who's directing like the light changes, if Wes is doing it or he maybe has an assistant director doing it. But it's just like, all right, change the light setting 3, change the light setting 2, because like it all is happening in one take,
right?
That movement. And so, yeah, just, I don't know. There's just so many moving parts. Stockhausen mentioned that the jungle was in Henry Sugar was probably one of the most intricate sets, just because of like the mixture of like textures and color and just like making sure it was painted just so that like when it moves in or moves out or zooms in, like everything like matches up just right. Like, I just can't even imagine getting that done. But yeah, there's so much going on in these movies. There's tons of camera techniques. I wrote like just a list of things I could think of off the top of my head. So there's like the aperture, like transitions, like where they close the aperture. There's these like, of course, Wes Anderson whip pans and like quick cuts. And we talked about the back projection behind Cumberbatch while he's like walking in place, with the back projection showing him walking down the street. There's a ton of dolly work, of course. Wes Anderson loves to do that dolly work on tracks.
Some of those hospital dolly shots in Henry Sugar are incredible.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I saw some behind the scenes stuff of them doing it. And yeah, it's not even like they're not on tracks at that point, because you couldn't make tracks because you're following an actor.
So you would see them in the shot.
Right,
Yeah.
you would see the tracks up ahead, and Wes doesn't really do.
It's not something he's going to want to clean that up.
Yeah, he's not going to do post work on that. He's just like, no, we'll do the work to make it happen in production, so we don't have to do it in post. But yeah, so lots of dolly work. Yeah, you can probably look up just like making of Henry Sugar and probably see some of that behind the scenes stuff on YouTube. That's where I saw it. He does a split screen even. I think that's in Poison. He does this split screen. I think that's the only one where he does it. But and I can't even remember when the first time he did this split screen was. I know it's in Asteroid City. I want to say there's a scene maybe in French Dispatch where he does split screen.
Are there no split screens during the phone tree in Grand Budapest? It seems like there might be.
There might. Yeah, there might be. And now that you're saying that, there might even be split screen in like either Life Aquatic or even Royal Tenenbaums when people are like on the phone. But I can't remember off the top of my head. It's been a while since I watched those episodes now. But yeah, definitely something he's started doing more recently is the split screen. The other thing that I really like is the highlighting of the eyes, which he does. He does it in Henry Sugar when the police officer confronts him. It like highlights his eyes, and it kind of like accentuates the shame he's feeling in the eyes. And then the other one I could think of, I can't remember if it happens more than these two, but it highlights Peter's eyes in the Swan when the train is coming. And so I thought those were really cool. Those felt like new. Those didn't feel like kind of Wes distinctive kind of things.
No.
That kind of felt a little bit new. But yeah, and then of course a ton of miniature work and a little bit of stop motion even
here and there.
Yeah, but yeah, they had like different scales for different looks and scenes and whatever. I think Stockhausen said that there's like multiple different sizes of the tree in the Swan, just because you see it from like several different perspectives, and so there were like, and then there's like the way they use miniatures. Sometimes there's like even a miniature either in front of or behind the actual actors on the set, and like the perspective, makes it fit. But yeah, there's just so like they do so much miniature work. Like there's the tunnel for Henry Sugar's car. There's the shoes when you're looking down the railroad tracks and seeing the shoes. That's actually like miniature.
Oh, really?
I
hadn't realized that.
Yep.
Yeah, that's cool.
The circus train, obviously, behind Edmond Khan when he's telling his story.
Right.
And then the back projection. So there's like, it's basically like there's a projector set up behind Benedict Cumberbatch as Henry Sugar when he's coming out of the casino, and they do back projection of like basically like a camera moving through like down the sidewalk of a city. And they built that city miniature to film the film of the camera moving through it.
Gotcha.
And then back projected that behind Benedict Cumberbatch. And so like I saw like a little video of them like making it, and there's just like these like artists like painting intricately like the bricks of these buildings and stuff.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Just like meticulous and like really like cool. yeah, and there's definitely more miniature work, but those are the ones that kind of like stood out or were interesting or like that I saw in a YouTube clip.
Sure.
Yeah, it's I don't know, the production of this is just incredible, and we'll get into, I guess, probably more detail. We'll in a minute we'll probably start talking through each of the shorts in turn.
Sure.
But yeah, what was there anything that like really stood out to you as far as like the production?
I think it was pretty well covered.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't think of anything else.
Yeah. We did mention the cast, but I wanted to kind of talk about the cast before we get into each individual film. So Wes did say like the people he cast were people that he found interesting to watch, which I was like, I don't know, that seems kind of just like a vague answer. Like, would you cast people that you didn't think were interesting to watch in any movie?
I would hope not.
So,
unless you've got a very specific role in mind.
yeah, someone that you don't want people to be interested in watching for
Right.
that role. I don't know. But yeah, so I was like, well, I'll put that in the notes, but it doesn't sound very like enlightening to me about how he cast this film. But yeah, this is I want to say this is Benedict Cumberbatch, Dev Patel, and Richard. How do you say his last name? Ayoade, something like that. Ayoade for the listeners.
I've heard it said, but
Yeah.
now that you're asking me, I can't. I don't know what
maybe.
it is.
That's what I want to say. Ayoade or something. Anyway, maybe Chase will find it while I'm talking. Yeah, we also have returning cast members in Ralph Fiennes and Bing Kingsley and Rupert Friend. This is just his second. He was in Asteroid City, and now he's back again for this one. At least I think, was he in French Dispatch? Rupert Friend.
I think he was.
Yeah,
He didn't have a very big role,
right.
But I believe he was.
Yeah, let me. I'm gonna pull up his thing and see. Yeah, he was in French Dispatch. I was right. So yeah, he's just a recent addition to the West team, but nonetheless a returning guy. But yeah, there are three. Let's see, 1, 2, 3 new guys, and then 3 returning. Which is pretty cool. I did also write Asa Jennings, who was the kid that followed Rupert Friend around in the Swan and kind of acted stuff out, because I think he did it. I want to give him a shout out. There's other like kind of side people, obviously, in the other shorts, but he was the only one that wasn't like a major actor that also I feel like had a very like important role. And think he did a really good job. So. And he was only in the Swan. I didn't actually look to see if he was in any of the other ones, but that's the only one I noticed him in. But yeah, so Cumberbatch. So the only one that's in all 4 is Ralph Fiennes, because Ralph Fiennes plays Roald Dahl,
right?
Also, and so if you've seen it, if you haven't seen it, you'll find out. But all of them, at some point, some of them start off with showing Roald Dahl in his kind of writing hut. Some of them just cut to him at some point. And he kind of like is doing some narration of the stories himself. I say himself, Ralph Fiennes as Roald Dahl,
right,
is doing narration of Roald Dahl's stories, dressed as Roald Dahl in a kind of like makeshift Roald Dahl writing hut kind of set,
right,
which is made really cool. I think I read Stockhausen say like there's even like items from Dahl's actual writing hut in there. Of course,
that makes sense.
Yeah, there's even in if you watch Fantastic Mr. Fox, there's some like kind of Roald Dahl writing hut Easter eggs in there that are like not necessarily like from that, but like models of it.
Sure.
Obviously. Like
that's cool.
Like I think the coffee cup Mr. Fox is drinking out of at the dinner table at the beginning is like the coffee cup that was in Roald Dahl's writing cut, which
That's
is cool. Yeah. But yeah, so I thought that was cool. So Ray Fiennes is the only one in it, which I'm pretty sure in the past I've thought Ray, it was like Ray as a nickname of Ralph, but it's actually Rafe. Like,
right.
And so like I think even like maybe on the Grand Budapest episode, I like just was saying it wrong the whole time, if I'm recalling right. And like, I think more recently I was hearing someone say, and I was like, I've been saying his name wrong. I assumed people were like just saying Ray for short of Ralph or something, but it's not. It's spelled Ralph, but it's pronounced Rafe.
Yeah. I sympathize. Yeah.
So I was like, when I realized that, I was like, oh, people are gonna think I'm like such an idiot. But yeah, so Ray Fiennes is in all of them. He plays other roles in 2 of them, but plays Roald Dahl in all of them. But yeah, so starting with Henry Sugar, you have Benedict Cumberbatch playing Henry Sugar, and also Max Engelman, which now that I'm saying that, I wrote it down, but I'm trying to remember who that was in the...
that is the makeup artist character that they largely write out of the movie, but they kind of introduce at the very end.
That's right.
When Roald Dahl is like meeting the partners of Henry Sugar to get permission to write the story, which is part of the framing narrative of the book itself.
Right. Another layer, which we'll get into, but yeah, so yeah, he plays Henry Sugar and Max Engelman. I mean, that's just for like a second.
Yeah.
And then Ray Fiennes is obviously Roald Dahl, and he plays the policeman that confronts Henry Sugar towards the end. You have Dev Patel playing Dr. ZZ Chatterjee, and John Winston, a dual role there. Ben Kingsley is there playing M. Khan and the croupier. And then you have Richard Ayoade playing Dr. Marshall, who's the other doctor with Chatterjee. And he also plays the great yogi that you see that Khan is trying to find. The only one not in Henry Sugar is Rupert Friend. He's not in that one, but all the other guys are. And it's the longer of the 4 and the bigger production, so there's more like prominent characters needed. Right. So that makes sense.
I want to say that this is just kind of the way it worked out, but it seems like Benedict Cumberbatch is in 2 and Rupert Friend is in 2.
Yeah. I think all of them are only in 2 except for Ray Fiennes. If I'm thinking correctly. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So all of them are in 2 except Ray Fiennes, who is only in all of them because, again, he plays Roald Dahl.
Right.
Yeah, and then, like I said, Ray Fiennes in The Swan is just Roald Dahl, which it cuts to, does it start with him? Does it start with Dahl? Do all of them start with Dahl?
Not all of them start with Dahl.
That's what I thought.
The Swan goes straight into it.
That's what I thought. But it cuts to Dahl towards the end.
Yes.
Towards the very end.
It seems like the Ratcatcher might do the same. Yeah. I don't think the Ratcatcher starts with Dahl.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Poison, I think, does. No, Poison jumps right in too.
Yeah, so Henry Sugar's the only one that starts with Dahl.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. The Swan, Benedict Cumberbatch not in there. Ray Fiennes is Dahl, and then you have Rupert Friend. Rupert Friend is really like the only like main guy in that. Dahl, obviously, it cuts to at the end.
Right.
Ray Fiennes is Dahl, but it's that. The Swan is pretty much all Rupert Friends.
Yeah.
Along with the kid that's kind of acting out some of his stuff.
And the occasional person handing in items.
Yes. Or like moving a piece of the set
Right.
for them, or making the sound of a gun.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you never see any other faces.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't see any of the other characters. It's just Rupert Friend, who is the narrator, and that you find out is like, this is something different than the book. You find out like that the narrator is an older Peter, Peter Watson.
Right.
And then Asa Jennings, who I mentioned, plays the young Peter Watson. And so it's cool because they, at some point in the middle, you find out that the narrator, played by a friend, is the older version of Peter Watson, kind of reminiscing on this tale. And they start like, him and the kid start switching off, like acting out the story, which is kind of, I think is pretty cool. And like, even like, I guess like kind of profound in a sense, in a way.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It definitely, it's definitely like a visual choice that adds a lot to the story itself, I think. Like adds another layer of depth to what Dahl did with it. But yeah, I think Friend is just great. He does like different voices and stuff. We'll talk about it, but yeah, the next one, and these, I'm doing it in this order because they actually did come out like day after day. So Henry Sugar came out one day, and then for the next, like, for a sequence of 4 days, only one came out a day.
Right.
So there is technically like a release order for them. They didn't all like drop at once, even though they're just a day apart. Which
I appreciate from Netflix, of all people.
I do.
Yeah.
Because I was able to, like, it was like kind of a thing. Like, I was like, okay, we watched Henry Sugar the day it released, and then me and my wife, we watched that, and then, you know, each day we watched the new one that came out. So that was kind of fun. But yeah, then the next one was The Rat Catcher, and that had Ray Fiennes is Roald Dahl in that, but he's also the Rat Man.
Right.
The Rat Man himself. And then you have Richard Ayoade playing the kind of newspaper editor. And then Rupert Friend is in that one too, playing, I didn't even know the character's name, but apparently it's Claude Cubbage.
Yes.
Who's, I guess, is he like the mechanic in the mechanic shop, I think, next to the newspaper?
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't even know his name. His name is Claude Cubbage. I don't even remember that from the story, but it must be in the short story.
I think so.
Yeah. I didn't even remember that.
They certainly say it a couple of times in the one I listened to today.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's that one has, 3 guys in it. And I would say, we'll go ahead and name the last short who's in those, and then we'll jump into them, because I don't want to get too much into what the actors do. We'll do that one by one. But yeah, the last one was Poison, in which Dev Patel is back, and he's playing Supervisor Woods. This is kind of set in
Timber Woods. Is a really fun name. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Is that his name? Okay. In the cat, like in the IMDb and Letterboxd, it just says Supervisor Woods. Gotcha. So I didn't even realize his name was Timber. I read these stories, but I guess I didn't like focus in on the names of the people, obviously. And then Cumberbatch is back too, playing Harry Pope, which is kind of a funny name. Obviously, Ray Fiennes playing Dahl, and Ben Kingsley is back too for this one, playing Dr. Ganderby.
Yes.
Ben Kingsley, I don't know why, but people love casting Ben Kingsley as people of other like ethnicities.
Well, for both of these, it actually, it actually works out. He's I forget. I'm spacing on my pronunciation. Anyhow, but he's an Indian
Okay.
of Indian descent. Yeah,
Gotcha. Yeah.
His father was.
Well, then good. He finally is cast in a role that he is that ethnicity. But when he's cast as like all the other ethnicities, it's hard to trust when he's cast.
I don't blame you. Yeah.
But yeah, well, I guess we'll jump in and kind of talk through these movies one by one. So first, obviously, is Henry Sugar, the wonderful story of Henry Sugar, to be more specific.
Yes.
And I don't know if you can see, probably not. It's just probably looks like books in the video, but like I did put the book. I got the book right there. It's actually the wonderful story of Henry Sugar and 6 more. So there's 7, I guess, total short stories in the book. And the only other one from this collection of short films is The Swan. The Swan is in that collection. The other 2 are from a different collection, I guess. But yeah, the wonderful story of Henry Sugar. It's I guess, like, I think I called it earlier, like the flagship short of this collection.
That's fair.
Yeah.
It certainly seems like it's the one he had the most like drive for making.
Yes, yeah. Obviously, like, he had the rights for that for 10 years, and then these other ones, like I said, he kind of like was like, well, let me find some others that I can make in this way, in this format. And so, yeah, Henry Sugar is yet another in the same year, very multi-layered story.
Mm-hmm.
Asteroid City was a TV documentary about a playwright writing a play that is acted out by a casting crew that is portrayed cinematically. The play itself, it's a lot. It's a lot of layers. And this is like a very multi-layered story in and of itself. Like, it's just written that way,
right?
And even like you mentioned earlier, like, part of the framing is Dahl himself, like, getting this story from the costume guy,
right?
Which is obviously all fictional, but the way he tells the story as if
he's pretending it's a true story.
Yeah, he pretends it, and even like at the end, or I guess I would say maybe 3/4 of the way through, he kind of stops and says, if this were just a story, it would go this way, but this is a real story. This is a true story. So this is what happened.
Yeah, I have to tell you what actually happened. Yeah. I can't just give you a satisfying, the normal satisfying ending.
Right. Which is really fun. And I wrote down this quote from Wes, which is both funny and insightful. But he said, quote, "I like stories that are stories within stories, and plays within stories, and movies within plays within stories. But I think this story, Henry Sugar, may have been the first thing I ever read that made me kind of intrigued by that concept." And so finally, we're getting, this comes out in Wes interviews, and we're finally getting to the roots of like why he's so obsessed with making multi-layered stories. And it makes sense. Like, you read this as a kid, and you I guess, like, he kind of became enamored with that idea of that kind of multi-layered story concept. And it starts coming out in his filmmaking, in his writing. But yeah, like we said, this stays pretty much straight on. All of them pretty much stay straight on with the story itself.
They do.
There's like, this one of all of them, I would say, probably has the most quote unquote missing, just because it's a bigger story. Even it's much longer than all the other ones too. So for Wes's short, he really kind of, I think I kind of said it earlier, he kind of trims the fat. There's a few instances, like So like when he's first starting with his like gambling trick, I think in this short story he like kind of does a few attempts,
Right.
and Wes is just like does one attempt and then gets down to the business, which makes sense for this format. But yeah, I think he kind of just like trims the stuff that like doesn't necessarily add, that you couldn't get from what's already there.
Right.
Which I appreciate. It's kind of like tight, a little bit tighter storytelling. But yeah, it's we talked about how it is set up with Dahl preparing his workstation there in his hut for writing, and I really feel like this whole endeavor feels this way, but especially like the way all of the whole thing starts with releasing Henry Sugar, and this is the very first thing you see is Ralph Fiennes as Roald Dahl like setting up his writing station. And I even read that Wes was in an interview was talking about how he heard Ralph Fiennes like in costume over on set as Dahl, like kind of like talking something to himself, and Wes was like, "Hey, what are you saying?" And Ralph Fiennes was like, "Oh, well, you know, I watched a lot of the footage of Dahl that you sent, and he had this like ritual that he would like do for before he writes and stuff like that. And so I kind of like him doing that." And Wes was like, "Oh, well, just like do it louder and we'll film." And so that whole thing was like not necessarily like in the script or planned. Ralph Fiennes had just like was so like, you know, trying to be true to Roald Dahl, and Wes was like, "Oh, we'll just film that."
That's
and
really
put
cool.
put it in the movie. And so yeah, and because of that, it really feels like an ode to the written word, in both the sense of like just portraying Dahl in that way, starting the whole thing off with him preparing to write, the kind of like ritual it takes to get in the mindset to write, and then just like with sticking to Dahl's actual words for the most part.
Yeah.
And like just like literally like reading his book on screen, which I think is really cool. And on that note, the dialogue itself, because it's mostly like the narration of the actual story as it's written, it feels like the way it's delivered, it feels like you're reading the story to your children.
Right. There's a lot of he said and I said and
yeah. He includes like he doesn't take out that stuff in the script.
No.
So
You're hardly ever like seeing an actual conversation play out. You're having a narrator who is a character in that conversation tell you about the conversation as action plays out behind them, usually.
Right. And then sometimes he'll say what someone says, and they're just there in the scene. They don't necessarily say it. But sometimes he says like, and then he said this, and then the character will say it.
Right.
One of the standout ones was I want to say it's when they find out that Imdad Khan has died, before he gets to like learn more about him being able to see without his eyes. And the Dev Patel, Dr. Chatterjee, who's narrating this part, says, "That's that," he said, talking about the other doctor. And then it kind of pauses for a second. And then Iode, as the other doctor, says, "That's that." And it kind of like, it's like this way of like emphasizing the melancholy, I guess, which is really, really, really insightful to take, like, to have the narrator actually just like reading out, "That's that," he said, and then a pause while they're like kind of staring at the screen with kind of this melancholy look on their face. And then the guy actually says, "That's that," and delivers it with that melancholy. And the, like, when the narrator says it, he's just like narrating it.
Right.
But then the actual character says the line with the emotion in it. And it like emphasizes.
And I did find that pause even like really stands out with as dense as the I mean all four of them, but particularly Henry Sugar is with dialogue and movement. There's really no breathing room, except for a few key spots where you really notice it. You really feel that weight.
And all of them have those moments, which is really cool. But yeah, that's one of the standout ones in that short for me. Really cool. Something true to all of them is Wes shows some things that are being spoken and doesn't show some things that are being spoken.
Yep.
So like the standout one is actually from the Rat Catcher to me, when he's showing like the tin of poison, and he's not actually like he's talking about the tin of poison and acting like he's holding the tin of poison, but there's not anything there. Or the
rat, rat and the ferret.
Yeah.
With him just like pretending they're running around inside his clothes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that, I think that's probably the most like, those stand out as far as that goes. But it happens a lot in Henry Sugar too, is that there's just not in this moment anything like coming to mind of how that plays out. Well, there is like, so he rides off on the bicycle when he leaves Endicon, when he leaves the hospital, he rides off on the bicycle, and then he explains like what he does after he like rides it out of frame, but you don't see it.
Yeah.
You just kind of have to imagine it. And what that does for me is it feels like, so if you've ever like read a physical Roald Dahl book, there's illustration. It's one of he's the sort of author that has like illustrations in his books. They're chapter. Oh, these are short stories, obviously, but his chapter books, like they're chapter books, but they also have illustrations in them.
Right.
And so it almost feels like reading one of those books. Like I read Fantastic Mr. Fox to my son last year. And so there's pictures on some pages, but there's not pictures on every page. It's a chapter book.
Yeah.
And
you're having to use your imagination a lot, even though you can visualize things in a way that's being like shown to you.
Right.
But you still have to use your imagination.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And it's that idea. And
the rest of it.
And that way it's an ode to writing again. It's, and especially like writing for children that has like illustrations, because it's like, oh, on this page, like, oh, look, this is what's happening. You can see a little like drawing of it. And then you flip the page and like more stuff is happening, but you don't have an illustration to look at anymore. So you just have to imagine it. And you see that like on screen, like live as it's being narrated, read to you.
Right.
It's really cool.
It is.
And yeah, I love that. There's a lot of deadpan, like a lot of Wes Anderson movies have very like deadpan comedy, obviously. But the way it plays in these is kind of unique, I think.
Yeah.
Because it's it makes more sense that the delivery is deadpan, or a lot of the kind of funny lines, or the way that things play out, because it's a narrator. Like it's not it's not an actual character. It's like,
or even when it is the character, it's not them. It doesn't feel like it's them in the moment,
right,
telling it to you, because it's the character narrating.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, yeah, it's just like a way of Wes doing sort of what he's always done, but in a different format where it feels fresh, and kind of like plays a little differently, but it's still like comic, which I thought was really cool. I really like, the sequence in Henry Sugar where he's doing the costume changes, like towards the end.
Oh yeah.
That's a great, it's like very short, but it's really funny. I thought, yeah, I don't know what else in Henry Sugar kind of stood out to you? Like any favorite sequences, or like set pieces, or
set pieces. I mean, I do love the visual gag when when he goes to talk to the yogi, and the yogi's meditating, and he he starts levitating, and they just have like a box that's painted to look like the set.
Yeah.
That he just turns so that now you can't see it. It just blends in with the set, and he sits on it.
Yeah.
It looks like he's floating.
Yeah.
And then at the end, he turns it back.
Yeah.
That's great. And then they do the same thing at the end with Benedict Cumberbatch.
Right. Yeah, it's so great. And that's part of that jungle sequence that I mentioned earlier, where like it's like you're walking through the jungle, through the brush, but the set's kind of like moving out of the way of the camera as it's like going through.
And then you have like the hut and everything like built out.
Yeah.
But then the background from that is just like
Painted.
a wall painting.
Yeah. Yeah. So great.
Yes.
It's also great. I've mentioned probably 2 or 3 times by now the back projection sequence. I thought that was really funny. It's like it plays comically, but is also like really like inventive and cool. And then there's also the there's the sequence where it's the lawyer guy, I guess, that's sitting there. And just like bringing in like all the cash and stuff. I thought that was really funny, like a funny visual of all the cash sitting there on like rolling pallets.
Yes.
I don't know. There's a lot in Henry Sugar that's really great. The way where he's like imagining like being able to look inside of himself and see if he has like an artery or whatever, and it brings in the little x-ray thing in front of him is really great.
Another one that had jumped out to me when you were talking about like like them not visualizing what they're telling you, and like you just having to imagine it, is the scene where he's like throwing the money and like talking to people down below him, but they never show like the crowd forming, like gathering money and stuff. He's just like, it's just like a set built to look like the top of an apartment building, and he's just throwing money out.
Oh yeah.
I did really like that they gave Ray Fiennes the role of the policeman, because it feels like Roald Dahl coming in to tell you the moral of the story.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's great. Love that. But yeah, it's a lot. I also really love the ending. I love where he comes to with just like I think one of the things that Henry Sugar says is, I don't want to be the richest man on earth, which he could be.
Oh yeah.
And then I really love, like, there's a line, it's a really simple line, but it just says his work was complete. And I really just love the succinctness, I guess, of that. Like, it's just that idea of like living your life and doing something with your life that was meaningful, even if it didn't like change the world. Like it was meaningful and like made others like, a significant, like some people's lives better. And to say like just that line, his work was complete, is just like, I thought that's like a very moving, just like very succinct way to think about a life well lived,
It is.
So I love the way it ended that. And two, like another thing about this story in particular is that a lot of Roald Dahl stories can be pretty cruel or harsh.
They can be, as we'll come to find.
Yes, very soon, actually. And this one is a very like sentimental story, a very like sweet ending, sentimental, like there's not a whole lot of like harshness to it, even like throughout the story. Like obviously like Henry Sugar is like kind of a rich jerk at first, but he's not like, I think there's even a line in the beginning of the story where it says they weren't bad man, but they weren't necessarily good either. Him and his friends. And so he's kind of just like this neutral. He's not really villainous in any way. He's just like, oh, I can make a lot of money doing this. And then like comes to find he doesn't actually want all that money. And yeah,
there's something nice about like you said, it's kind of odd for a Roald Dahl story how, like sincere and sentimental this is and all that. It's kind of nice that this is the story that he's insisting is a true one.
Yes.
Like, oh, this is how the world really is.
Or like, I guess the subtext there is, this is the way the world should be.
Yeah.
Which I think is really cool to see and to like discover while like either reading the story or like watching this short. It's kind of like this, there's a hopeful like lining around it of like, if we can all come to this realization, like this would be, and maybe there's a sense in which by true, it's that ecstatic truth that we were talking about that Herzog kind of coined of like, okay, like it's not a fact that this is actually a true, like a factual story, but it's true in the sense of this is truly who we should be. Maybe there's a little subtext to that point.
Like that.
Yeah. I could see that. Even if it wasn't like intentional on the part of Dahl or Wes, like in the way he wrote it, like that, maybe subconsciously, that's the kind of like underlying thing happening thematically.
Hello again. Do you know how you can really support the show for free in just a few minutes or less? That's right. Just leave a rating and review on Spotify and Apple, or wherever you listen that might allow for ratings and reviews. These really help the visibility of the podcast. In fact, just hit that pause button right now and drop the review right now. And then you can get back to the show. I'd greatly appreciate it. Okay. I trust that you went and left that rating and review now. Back to the show.
But the Swan, on the other hand, as opposed to a very like sentimental and sweet story, is a very harsh and cruel story.
Still kind of got some optimism there in the messaging of like, putting a brave face on the world, but
So that I actually like. So I think this is probably Henry Sugar is my favorite of these four. Which
I would agree.
Which might be kind of unfair because it's the longer, it's the more like you can tell it was like the more like prominent thing being made. And these are kind of like just kind of put alongside it, these other three. So it might not be fair to like really like compare them in that way, but yeah, Henry Sugar is definitely my favorite. I think The Swan is my second favorite, which is funny because it was my least favorite of the stories to read. I honestly like didn't enjoy reading this story, not necessarily because it was like badly written, just because like the harshness of what's happening in this story with these bullies like was much harder to read and imagine than what you actually get on screen, which you don't really see any of that on screen. But when you're reading it, when it's being narrated to you on screen and you're seeing like some of the things acted out, like you don't have to do your own imagining of what's happening because you have something to look at. But when you're just reading the story and you're imagining yourself these things happening, it just like wasn't fun for me.
That's fair.
Because these two bullies are just like, they're like devilish. Like it's like I don't know. I don't know. They feel like what's the movie with Damien, the kid?
Oh,
The Omen. Is it The Omen? I don't know.
Maybe
the one where the kid is the devil, basically.
Right.
I think I've seen parts of it. I haven't seen the whole movie, but I was like, man, these kids might be the devil. Like,
yes. And your you're kind of getting the story from the main bully's perspective reading the book as well.
That is true. Yeah, I didn't think about that, but that might be part of why too. It starts off with him in his home with his dad, and you kind of like see why he is the way he is. I guess based on like how his dad interacts with him. You don't really get that in this Wes Anderson short,
right?
I guess that's probably like the one thing he cut out was the very beginning of the story. He jumps right into the two boys like meeting up, and can't even think of their names, Ernie and something. It doesn't matter. Yeah,
that's fair. It's been
their names are best forgotten because they're awful people.
They are terrible little boys.
But yeah, it's I just thought that was funny. Like it's like I really loved the short, and I just hated reading this short story.
It seems like they actually do a bit more, even in the story though. Like they shoot a duck and
there's a duck that they shoot before the swan.
Mm-hmm.
In the short story, that's right. I guess the disheartening thing about this is it's inspired by a newspaper clip that Dahl had. This is actually at the very end of the West short. There's like a title card, and it mentions that Dahl had the newspaper clip that inspired the story in his idea book for like 30 years or something before he actually like finally wrote this story.
I would be curious to know what aspects of this were in the clip.
Right. Yeah. It's like, well, is it just like the case of it's interesting. I wonder what the newspaper article was.
Right.
That inspired it.
You would hope it would be, him being tied up and, used as like a hunting dog, or even like him getting shot out of the tree and not like the train.
Yeah.
But who knows?
Yeah, who knows really? And like, I almost wonder if like in the real story, maybe the kid dies or something. Because otherwise, like, well, I guess like if a kid's getting swan wings tied to him and like shot out of a tree, I guess that's like newspaper worthy, even if he survives. But yeah,
or tied down to train tracks, even if he survives, that would still be newsworthy.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know, but it's interesting. I do wonder what that newspaper clip was like. But like I said, we talked about earlier, Rupert Friend does most of the work here. Yeah,
which is probably also a thing that helps with it being easier. Is you're seeing him and you're not picturing a child.
Right. Yeah. So he has the kid that's acting out some of the Peter Watson stuff. And he's the narrator, and I love his narration. It's my favorite narration is between him and Richard Ayoade and the Ratcatcher. It's hard for me to decide. I think Friend has it by a little bit, maybe.
That's fair.
Yeah. And he does like the different voices for the different kids, the different bullies, which like when he started doing it, I was like, oh, this is just like when I read stories to my kids. I always like to do voices. It's fun.
It is fun.
He's consistent with it. I love it. And then I just found too, like the composition in this one is just really incredible. Like the thinking of like when he's walking between the hedges, the way they like open a door in the hedges and like walk out to where the lake is. The different, like we were talking about, the different sizes of the tree, like how for one, there's like really great continuity between those. Like now, like
really like
after watching and then knowing after watching, like reading, oh, there's different, like several different sizes of this tree in miniature and stuff. Like I would have never guessed that.
I wouldn't have either. I thought that it was like legitimately like them like using magnification and stuff.
Yeah. And which reminds me of the magnifying glass in Henry Sugar. That was another great little.
Oh yeah,
gag.
that was.
But yeah, the great continuity with the tree, and really like a beautiful like set piece. I guess there's several different ones since there's different sizes, but like,
Right.
really beautifully, like it looks like an illustration in a book.
It does.
Which is really cool. And also like I want to say like there's probably a little bit of stop motion done with like the silhouette of the kid of Peter Watson up in the tree.
I think so. Yeah.
Puppet work or stop motion or something. And then I think it's just really, really beautifully composed. I really like it.
Mm-hmm. The use of set work is very really good in it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's a lot of like, this one has a lot of extras kind of coming in and like handing props over or taking props. We're like coming in and tying the wings to him and all that kind of stuff.
That's making me think of something else from Henry Sugar. The scene where Ben Kingsley is telling his story, narrating his story within the story as Khan, and he's supposed to be a younger man, so the makeup team comes in and starts doing his makeup to make him look younger within frame. It's great.
Yeah,
sorry,
so great. No, it's good because there's so much in Henry Sugar where we're gonna miss some stuff, so it's good to jump back and catch that. But yeah, I thought Rupert Friend was just like a revelation in this role, like incredible. The two like standout things that I think of are when he stands up from after the train goes over him. He stands up and like there's this moment. It's one of those moments of pause, and the way he like holds himself in that moment and his face and everything, it just communicates so much. And like, just like the grief of that memory, like reliving that memory, is just like all captured in that short pause. And then like the kid actor, like gives the next line to like spur him back on, like, hey, you're supposed to be telling the story. And then he jumps back in and like starts back into the narration. It's just like, it's an incredible moment. And then the other one is the delivery of the line where they're about to kill the swan, and he like screams out, "Please don't do it! Stop!" And like it's like there's so much emotion in that delivery.
Mm-hmm.
It's so good, and so Friend is just so great in this role.
He is.
It might be it's between this and Ray Fiennes' The Ratcatcher of my favorite performance of all of these.
I would have to agree.
Yeah. But yeah, one thing that I also really appreciated about this rendition of the story, as opposed to like reading the short story, that made it like much sweeter and optimistic and kind of like with like hints of hope, is that it to me it had all these moments of like grace and beauty like built into it, both like visually and I guess like delivery wise and stuff like that. Like I wrote like some of the ones that stood out was like the woodpecker is like a really cool like little moment of grace. Yeah. And then when he's laying there on the train tracks, the cloud and the plane is like a moment of like grace and beauty in the midst of like a cruel like experience that he's having.
The swan cygnets in the nest.
Yeah, the swan cygnets in the nest. Him seeing them and telling them that there's none there is like a moment of like grace and mercy for the swans, the cygnets at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mentioned the way Friend pauses is like this moment of like, I guess it's a moment of grace in the sense of like, he's like making room for like grief and like indicating that it's okay to, in those moments, take a moment to reflect. And then like there's some comic moments that are like good relief, like like I mentioned, there's an extra, and the friend as the narrating is like he fired the gun or something like that is the line, and they all kind of pause, and one of the extras like lifts his hands up like he's holding a gun and goes pew pew or something like that. It's like it's like laugh out loud funny when it happens.
It is.
And that's kind of sometimes like those comic moments I think are like moments of grace in a cruel story like that, that you kind of need. And even like I think the decision to cut back to Roald Dahl, which is kind of in the text itself too.
It is,
because he kind of has like an aside within like the source material where he like has this little aside of the story and then goes back to the way it ends.
Honestly, I think it's word for word.
Yeah. I think so too. And it's a really great like it is graceful like to cut to him too visually, because it's when Peter's falling out of the tree, and like to not show that and to have Dahl like have this aside and explain why the story is important, is like, to me, is like a moment of grace. And so there's just so many of them all throughout this rendition of it that like make it really, in the end, kind of a beautiful little story, like sad but beautiful, and hopeful. But yeah, there's it's this one, we were talking about it I think last night, me, you, and Robin, my wife. Y'all were talking about how like the ending is like sad because me and you had read the story and she hadn't. Right. And we were saying like, oh, the mom checks on him and he's okay in the short story. Well, in the film, I hadn't remembered that it cuts before you really know if he's okay or not.
Right.
And you had mentioned, well, it is him as like an adult narrating the story. And so there's kind of like that implication there that he was okay. Right. Because he survived and he's older now and narrating
the story. Yeah.
Yes. But that's like not explicit. And so like when it's like it ends with him delivering the line that the mom said of like, my dear little boy, what has happened to you? And then it fades. Yeah. And so like visually it's like, oh, did he die?
Yeah.
But I guess like if you think about it, you're like, oh no, he couldn't have, because he's telling the story as an adult.
Yeah.
But that's not, it's more of an implicit thing than an explicit.
Even because, that line of like, oh, this happened to me so many years ago is just like, just a line that's kind of thrown in there. Yeah. By the time you get to the end, you can almost have forgotten about it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And so it does add to like the sadness of the movie, which I think there's a sense though in which like you can't really take a story like that and like make it happy.
No.
It would be like, it wouldn't be, we've been talking a lot about what's true. It wouldn't be true. It might be factual that everything turned out all right, but it wouldn't be true to the story.
No.
Because the truth of the story is it's very sad that there's people in the world like that.
And yeah, even with the way that Dahl is telling the story versus, whatever really happened with, this miracle happening and him literally flying to safety.
Yeah.
He's still a little boy that got shot in the leg.
Yeah.
By, bullies that treated him terribly all day.
Yeah. Like trauma, like it's like trauma.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. The way you're treated that way. It's even that, like, I really love the kind of fantastical moment of him flying, like people seeing him fly through the air. reports of people seeing a swan fly. It's really cool and fantastical, and like I guess that in and of itself is a moment of grace and beauty, in a sense. And again, it's a thing of that ecstatic truth. Did he really fly through the air with the swan wings tied to him? Maybe factually not, but like the deeper truth there is that he did. He soared through that trauma and that terrible experience and landed safely on the other side of it.
Right.
So there is like, it's another instance of that ecstatic truth, a deeper truth behind that goes deeper than just like the fact of the matter, which I think is really cool. And then like we had talked about the side with Dahl. He has that line about unconquerable people.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a great line.
It is.
I didn't write down the exact quote, but it's something to the effect of, there are people in this world that basically like don't bend when everything like bad is, when there's like true like evil or badness coming up against them. They don't bend, and they stand up to it,
mm-hmm.
and they come out on the other side of it. And he says that those are unconquerable people. And then he says Peter was one of those people. And then it cuts back to the story. It's really, really cool and really, really powerful, I thought. Yeah. The Swan is great. It's my second favorite of these, I think. I know you said it wasn't, but
it's hard to rank them. It really is.
It is.
Or at least the three, shorter three. It's very hard to rate them. But yeah, it is very good.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it was just emotionally very impactful to me. As I'm sure it comes across in the way I've been talking about it. The Ratcatcher, on the other hand, I didn't find very emotional at all, but very fun.
Yes.
Extremely fun. And this one, I think, out of all of them is probably closest to exactly like the story.
Very close. Yeah.
It's I would say like too, it has like the best like literary descriptions of what you're seeing on screen. Like the matching of what you're seeing versus like how it's written and how it's like narrated is like so like in sync.
Mm-hmm.
It's so great. And a lot of that comes from Ray Fiennes as the Rat Man. He's like got these terrible like rat teeth and like this. I don't know. Like he obviously studied Roald Dahl and his mannerisms and rituals. Like this man must have watched a lot of rat videos. I'm picturing like Ray Fiennes kicked back with a pipe in front of a fireplace in his robe with his phone watching rat videos on YouTube. That's what I'm picturing him in my mind.
It's a great visual.
But it's like but it's like perfect. It's so good. Like if it was Jared Leto, it would be terrible.
Sure.
Because that man would like really be trying too hard to be a rat. But with Ray Fiennes, it's just like it's so like perfectly disturbing. But yeah, another thing, like just like production wise in this one, there's a lot of like the camera doing what's being described.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a little bit more done in this than in some of the other ones. The one example that comes to mind is when he's telling them about how to kill a sewer rat, and the camera like ends up in the tunnel that is the sewer, and like he's talking about like the rat coming through the sewer, and the camera kind of like moves through the tunnel towards them, who are looking like into it. And so like the camera's doing what's being described, like from, I guess, the perspective of the rat. So there's several instances of that in this one that make that a kind of like, I don't think a unique feature. Like I think that's in some of the other ones, but it stood out more in this one to me. I guess. But yeah, Ray Fiennes as the Rat Man. It's between him and Rupert Friend as the best performance of this collection.
For me, this is the best performance. This would probably be my second favorite. The more I think about it,
Yeah,
I really really love this one.
Yeah, it's great. His performance is incredible, and I think Ayoade is my favorite narrator. Him and Friend are my favorites for sure. I would probably give the edge to Friend just because like the emotionality behind it is like so good. But Ayoade, the way he like delivers his damn. Have you ever watched the IT Crowd?
I have.
He is so great in that.
He is.
He's hilarious. It's a British sitcom about an IT
department.
Yeah, IT department of this office building. Very much British humor. But he's great. That's the only other thing I really know him from.
I know I've seen him pop up in other things, but that's the main things I know him for too.
Yeah. But yeah, the way he delivers the narration is like so good. It's like he was made for that sort of thing. But yeah, he one of the things that stood out was his delivery of the line, "You've almost got to be a rat yourself." It's like I wrote down when I was watching, like I wrote in my notes that line had this like really great nervous energy to it. And that like is perfect with the description of how the book describes the delivery of that line.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the way he says like, "Oh, I said it before I, could even think about what I was coming out of my mouth."
Yes.
And it really does feel that way.
Yeah. And like, but then like the rat catcher like takes that and like runs with it, and it's like, oh, this guy is messed up. But yeah. Another detail with him too that I really liked. This wasn't necessarily to do with him, more like production design and stuff. Was when the day changes, he like sits back down at his like editor's desk and like he has like a clip-on tie and he changes ties, I guess, to signify that the day changed, which I thought was a great detail. Yeah, I love the stop motion rat.
I do too.
And there's even like a point where the rat man is like talking about something, but the camera's on the stop motion rat, and so the stop motion rat's mouth is moving as if it's talking. And it just like even more like sets up like this like the I guess like synonymousness, whatever word makes most sense there, of like the rat man and a rat.
Yes.
So great. Yeah, and then the showdown of
the rat catcher and the rat,
right?
Yes.
Which Rupert Friend like puts in these rat teeth, these like little rat teeth, and like plays the part of the rat that he's fighting. And it's like there's these like cutaway shots to Dahl. It's like a lot happening all at once. There's like these cutaway shots to Dahl, and then there's like these disoriented like horror like freeze frames cutting back and forth between Fiennes and Friend as like the rat man and the rat like fighting.
And it seems like they do up the rat makeup on Fiennes as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's even like the way it's lit. I don't know if it's actually black and white, but it has like the way it's lit is kind of like has a black and white feel.
It seems like the lighting's very top down, so you get a lot of like shadows on the faces and
very like old time horror like lighting and all that. Very funny.
Very like kids around a campfire holding flashlights.
Yes, for sure. And even like I noticed watching around this time that the narration, the pace of Ayoade's narration quickens like during that sequence. Really great. It's just like top notch filmmaking decisions there.
Absolutely.
But yeah, to me, this story, it kind of feels like a strange tale. Like all the other ones kind of have a moral a bit and like are meaningful in a way. And this one to me is just kind of like, that's a really interesting, strange tale.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Like not every story has to have a moral.
For sure.
And so I appreciate that, like out of the 4, like he just did one that's like weird.
Yeah.
I don't know if you felt that way. Maybe you saw a moral in there.
I don't know that I saw a moral in there
Yeah.
necessarily. I do see some strange theming with, and I think I had mentioned this to you the first time I had watched it. I feel like Ralph Fiennes, the way they dress, I feel like they made him look like a grungy version of Wes himself.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
even I've like I went back and looked it up just to like make sure that like the visuals in my head were right,
Yeah.
and like you can find pictures of Wes Anderson
The hair
wearing that
Yeah.
outfit almost
the brown
exactly.
like with the pockets and
Mhm.
stuff. Yeah, now that you said that.
And I don't know, there's just something about the Ratcatcher as a character where his whole driving like notion in life is like trying to, like he comes into this petrol station where they've got the rat problem and he wants to like, you know, make a big show out of, oh, I'm here to deal with your
Yeah.
rat problem,
Yeah.
and I'm going to impress you. I'm gonna show you how good I am
Yeah.
at catching and killing these rats, and I'm really gonna make a spectacle out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when his first plan fails, he's like, do you want to see something even more amazing? Do you want to
And
see
disturbing.
Yes. And then like I don't know, there's just like a showmanship to the Rat Man that I really, I don't know, I think there's something there.
It's like a really strange Wes Anderson stand-in
Mhm.
of like, I'm going to impress you one way or another.
Yes, I'm going to show you something
maybe-
you've never seen before.
And maybe even lose some of the audience with how weird I get.
And there's even a line that, I mean, it's in the book too, where the rat catcher, like his very last trick, like the showdown with the rat, he like tries to get them to bet with him.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, you're gonna make me do this for like this tiny amount of money, really?
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I didn't think of any of that. But yeah, that's a really fun take. I like that. That's the rat catcher.
Hello there, listener. Don't you ever want more for your life? Don't you ever dream of surpassing the status of just podcast listener? Well, I've got good news. If you head on over to establishingshotpod.com and click the send a voicemail button on the right side of your screen, you can be featured on the podcast. I'd love to hear from you, whether it's a comment in response to an episode you liked, an opinion of mine you disagreed with, or just a question for me. And if you're too shy to have your voice featured, you can always email me at establishingshotpod@gmail.com. Don't settle for just being a podcast listener. Reach for the stars and get featured on The Establishing Shot. Back to the show.
Poison is the last of the 4. And it's my, like, I would say it's my least favorite, but I really like it a lot.
I like it a lot too.
So it's kind of like, it's hard to like say any of them are my least favorite. It's just like, if I had to rank them, it would probably be last. Which is funny. I actually would rank them in the order they came out. Now that I think about it. But yeah, it's a really good story.
It is.
Patel is the narrator in this one as Supervisor Woods, or Timber Woods, what you mentioned earlier, which I didn't even remember that. And I think that Patel is the fastest narrator by far.
He is.
That man is saying so many words so quickly. Which, it's impressive.
It's very impressive. Like
it's the hardest one to keep up with.
I can't imagine how many takes it took for them to get through that. Through like his scenes individually.
I bet Wes is like, so when I was doing the Wes series last year, like he's not the sort of director that does a ton of takes. Like they get things nailed down, and then they do a few takes, and then they're done. And a lot of that too is just because, I guess a lot of that is because a lot of directors, they'll get different takes with different angles and stuff for their editors to work with.
Sure.
But Wes is so like pre-planned all that stuff. Like he knows exactly how he wants it to look. So they just
he's not bothering to shoot from other angles.
Yeah, they do the one shot, and because he knows that's the one they're going to use. And so that's probably part of it. But they do, he does, like, from what I can gather, like he's not like a dude that's going to do a ton of takes. Like a Kubrick or somebody that like is trying to break their actors. But yeah, I mean, it had to have taken a lot of stuff. It's funny, one of the interview I was reading, the guy asked about when Benedict Cumberbatch as Henry Sugar like goes off camera and comes back with the facial hair or something. He was like, that was a lot of makeup to do. Like, did y'all like actually do that in real time, or did you like trick? And Wes Anderson kind of laughs, and he's like, or like, I read the interview, so it's just like laughs in parentheses, and says we might have done a little tightening of that, which, you know, it's the magic of filmmaking, the editing.
Absolutely.
But yeah, one thing I noticed at the very beginning of this, that is another example of like kind of an ode to writing and like reading even, is so I think it happens in other ones too, but this is when it happened here, I've noticed it very prominently. So Dev Patel's Woods is driving up, you know, to the house, and he gets out of the car, and he's narrating all along. And then the scene, like it cuts to him like on the porch, but he's just standing there not talking, but you still hear the narration from the last scene. He's talking, and he finishes his line from that last shot. And then the guy on screen that you're seeing that hasn't been like moving his mouth then picks up with the next line and continues narration. And I was like, when I was watching that, I was like, he turned the page. Like, it's like,
that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like a visual cinematic representation of like turning the page. I don't know if he actually thought of that, but that's what it made me think of.
I like that
when I was watching it. And so I just thought that was really cool. Yeah, so that was cool. Another little like thing of maybe this is something like that is just like being an ode to like writing and reading books and stuff. I thought that was cool. Cumberbatch is in this one as Harry Pope, which is kind of a funny name. But what's really incredible about Cumberbatch in this one is he's mostly acting with his eyes and the corners of his mouth.
Yes.
Like for, I would say 90% of this, he's just laying there, like twitching his eyes and the corners of his mouth.
And he does a great job at it.
It's great. It's so good. This one is my wife's favorite of the four, which is funny because it was my least favorite. But again, it's like there's not that far of a remove between all of them. But it's funny because she's like very much not into like suspense and like,
and this is the most suspenseful one.
And medical stuff.
Yeah.
And this is the most suspenseful and like full of medical stuff. And so when it finished and she was like, that was my favorite one, I was like, wow, this is like really movie magic going on right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is exciting. It is an exciting one because in a different way than the Ratcatcher, because there's like way higher stakes, I guess. You know, he has the crate so-called apparently on his stomach. I thought Benedict Cumberbatch was so good in this. It's probably one of the other like standout performances. It's funny because I think like the three best performances are in the three extra shorts.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that the performances in Henry Sugar are bad, but
certainly not.
Maybe it's just like the tightness of these like make the performance really like stand out, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know, maybe. But yeah, I love some of the things I wrote down that I love here. There's the quick flash cuts back and forth between Dr. Ganderby and Harry Pope when Dr. Ganderby is thinking like, "Don't spoil this." There's like the like cuts,
which I loved. Ben Kingsley in this, I thought his intensity in this was great.
Yeah, his stare in those cuts was like he really he was really letting the camera have it. I love like, so there's the point in the actual like short story where like they're pulling down the covers slowly, and he notices like the button on his trousers and how it's like made of ivory, and he's never even had trousers that had a button, much less one made of ivory. And he kind of like it's way more condensed here in the West Short, but he does like notice that, and I just think that's like really funny to in that moment of such intensity to like notice the button on the guy's trousers.
I liked going back to the being told things but not seeing them on screen. The idea that they supposedly just like soaked him with chloroform, but everything's perfectly dry as they're pulling the blanket off him.
Yeah, that's true. And I feel like if there was like a bed full of chloroform, like people would be pretty woozy.
Yeah.
All like everyone in the room, and they were not.
No.
Which they're not in the story either. So maybe I just don't know medically how that works. But yeah. I wouldn't want to be laying in a bed full of chloroform. I'll tell you that. There's the camera work. So it basically like switches to a very like obviously handheld camera when Cumberbatch like jumps up out of the bed after they pull the covers back, which I thought was like a smart move. Like I guess just camera wise to portray the intensity of that moment. Yeah, and then I don't know, was there anything else like kind of production wise that you liked in this one? It's pretty standard. It's just like basically in a room. There's not a whole lot like with the set going on in this one.
There isn't, because you've got like the whole set is basically like a house that's been cut in half. Sure. It seems like. Sure. So like you get one scene where Timberwoods is like outside on the porch, and Dr. Ganderby is like in the hallway, and Harry Pope is in the bedroom, and you can see all three in their respective places at the same time. And then I don't know, just like the camera work with like the way you feel like you're being suspended from the ceiling, looking down at them at different points, and I don't know, there is some stuff like that.
There is, yeah. I guess like for this one though, it felt like typical West stuff. There wasn't like new technique. It was, I mean, you have all that sort of stuff going all the way back to like Tenenbaums and Life Aquatic. True. With the dollhouse effect. And so I guess that's maybe what I was thinking of is like, there's not like these new like sets moving around kind of stuff happening so much in this one like there was in, which I guess Ratcatcher is similar in that way. This and Ratcatcher are more like typical Wes Fair as far as like the set design and stuff like that. And then with the Swan and Henry Sugar, you have more of like that stage production feel as far as like the way that the set moves and changes.
Definitely.
I guess these still do have like a stage production feel, but a much more static one.
Yeah. And like you said, some like a lot more stuff that he's done in the past.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I like this one. It just like, it wasn't, it just didn't feel as inventive to me, I guess, is why I appreciated some of the other ones more. But I did really love the way this one ended.
I did too.
Yeah, and I kind of hinted at this earlier when we were talking about it. But in the story, I want to say so when he goes out to the car, Woods is walking with Dr. Ganderby, and he kind of says something about like being sorry about the way he acted. He must be, whatever. And then Dr. Ganderby in the short story just kind of says he needs a vacation, and that's all that happens. Well, Wes changes those exchanges a little bit in this one, and there's two like prominent exchanges that kind of portray different things going on here. So obviously, like, Pope leaps up and is angry and offended, and like somewhat like understandably so, because he's been like laying still for so long. Anyone would be like angry and grumpy in that situation.
Absolutely.
But what comes out is blatant racism.
Yeah.
And it's that way in the book too, in Dahl's short story.
Right.
And I think Dahl is condemning that in the way he writes it. But the way
I agree.
Yeah, but the way Wes does it is, I wouldn't say more explicit, but more, I guess, modern, more aware.
Yeah.
Of what needs to be said, because it's still not explicit. It's still not like, it's not like in Wes's version he's like, that was racist. But
no.
There's the 2-line deliveries. For one, Woods says to Ganderby, he owes you his life, and Ganderby says, no, he doesn't.
Right.
And that's kind of like, there's the fact there that he doesn't, because there wasn't actually a crate.
Right.
But there's also like the deeper truth that we've been talking about going on of like, he doesn't, just that deeper truth of like, there's no, I don't even know how to express it. He doesn't owe me his life, and I don't owe him mine. There's kind of a rift there, I guess, in a sense, because of the way that he was treated. But then, Woods, this is the one that really stood out to me, was Woods tells Ganderby, I'm sorry. And Ganderby says, you can't be.
Yeah.
And that was the one where I was like, wow, that's where Wes has a more full and modern, I guess, understanding of racism and what it is. And even I wrote down, there's let me read it so I don't mess it up. It feels like he's grappling with how far your empathy can go, for someone that hasn't actually been in those shoes. So like, for me as a white, lower middle class American, to like say to, a Black American that's actually experienced racism in their life, for me to say like, oh, I'm sorry, it's like, I can't be like,
sure.
I haven't experienced it. Like, my empathy can only go so far. I can have those conversations with people that have experienced that, things that I have not experienced, and I can do my best to understand, but there's only so far that my empathy can go. And I think there's all of that is packed into those 2 lines. I'm sorry, you can't be.
That, for me, that's kind of the most powerful, like, standout line, I think, of the 4. Yeah, like, with what you were like, I guess kind of like my I feel about that line, like the way you did it, like with the Swan. I was like, oh, that's like I really took something out of that.
Yeah, it's probably right there with it for sure. It was really powerful. It was, and it delivered like very powerfully. Like it's not like overly dramatically delivered, but all the emotion is still there from Kingsley. Yeah, really, really good. Really, really liked that. But yeah, that's all of them.
Yeah.
We talked through all of them. Did you have any like final thoughts on these overall, or?
I don't know. I don't know that he has plans to do more, but I would love for him to do more of these.
We'll do that in a second. But my final thought, I just felt like the overall effect of the ways these are made and shown and portrayed is just it's like these are being actively made in front of you because of all the movement and motion and the narration and the sets and people like coming on and handing things and like you showing some things and not showing things, the lighting changes, just all of it. Like this, he's actively making the movie like on screen. It's not like you're watching a movie that's already been made. It's like you're watching the act of the movie being made, which is just so incredible to me.
Is.
And it just, to me, it feels like Wes is inviting you both to enjoy the story, but also to enjoy the filmmaking itself, which is very unique. And it to me, it comes from a place of an artist that loves the art of storytelling and loves the art of filmmaking so much that they want to like share that with you. And it just like is overflowing out of every frame to me. And I just love that about all four of these.
I agree.
Shorts. And to me, it's just like a really wonderful thing when an artist is so in love with what they're doing that they can't help but just like, but like both in this case, I think pushing the envelope of what the medium can do, which I think Wes really is doing here. It's something I've never seen
for sure
on screen before, which maybe someone more like well versed in film than me would be like, no, there's this or this, but definitely like mainstream, pushing the envelope, but also like pushing the envelope of what the medium is capable of, and then also like inviting the audience to kind of like enjoy and go along in that endeavor with them, just because like he's doing it right there on screen in front of you so that you can see what's going on. I just really loved that.
I did too.
And that was kind of my like main overall like overarching takeaway, I guess, from these four shorts. But yeah, we've talked about kind of talked about how we would each rate these four. What did you like place these within Wes's overall?
I did.
While you pull it up, I'll say, so I currently have Asteroid City and Henry Sugar sitting at like 6 and 7 in his filmography. And then the other shorts are kind of just scattered there in like the lower tier, I would say.
Gotcha.
Of his, not because I don't like him, just because obviously I really like them. I just really kind of love everything Wes does.
Yeah.
And so even like my least favorite Wes is probably like I like more than most other stuff. But yeah, I really, really thought Henry Sugar was phenomenal. And,
I did too.
And it's a like any given day it could probably move up,
Yeah, I've got Henry Sugar right below Darjeeling Limited as Henry Sugar being like number 8 for me. And then let's see, Ratcatcher's number 11 right under Rushmore.
I feel like we have very different Wes Anderson rankings. which
I believe very well might.
I've found to be the case because especially when I was doing that series, I always kind of do this at the end of the talk with all the guests, and everyone seems to kind of have different like rankings all over the place of Wes's films, even to the point where like I even had someone that were the Darjeeling Limited, I think was their favorite, which is like most people's like least favorite. So this just like, it's just all over the place.
Yeah.
And they're all great to me. So
they are.
But yeah, it really like it. I did read in an interview earlier today, actually, I found an interview that someone had done with Wes after these came, either before or after these came out. And they asked about future stuff. He said that before the writer's strike started, he had just finished a script with Roman Coppola that they were going to make with Benicio del Toro.
Oh, okay.
That they're planning on making. He said, so when the timing is right, the plan next is to do that. And like, he wouldn't give any other details other than the script is finished. He wrote it with Coppola and Benicio del Toro is going to star in it. So, hey, that's cool. Something to look forward to, there'll be another episode in the future for the Wes Anderson series. So
I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. But as far as what's next with the podcast, we are going to be doing an early Steven Spielberg series coming up. I know at some point in February, the first episode of that series is going to release. I'm just not sure when. There might be a couple of other non series episodes before that comes out. So I might do like my favorite films of 2023 coming up soon. I think I just watched My Neighbor Totoro with my son. You got him the Totoro book for Christmas. There's a novelization of it, and so I wanted him to watch the movie before the book, since that's how they came to be.
Yeah.
So we watched the movie and he loved it. So I might do like a little bonus episode review with him on Totoro.
It'd be fun.
He's in love with Cat Bus, as he should be.
Yes.
But I'll let him, or you'll have to wait till that episode to hear from him about it. So that might come out. But I am excited. I've been working on some guests for the Spielberg series, kind of lining up, scheduling, all that. So I'm working on it. It's coming soon. I'm really looking forward to it. It'll be the first series I've done where I have blind spots within the series. So I'll be watching some of these for the first time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to catching up with some things to listen along.
Yeah, I've actually been in the process of watching a lot of his early like TV stuff. So I'm like in the middle of his episode of Columbo that he directed and stuff like that. So and they're all actually like really well directed for a 23, 25-year-old. So I'm looking forward to this series. I'm doing early West, so it's 70s and 80s. Spielberg, yeah, sorry. This is Wes. I got West brain. But yeah, I'm doing early Spielberg, 70s and 80s. So, and then I might, you never know, I might just keep going with Spielberg, or I might take a break, move to a different director, and then come back to Spielberg later. He just has a lot of movies.
He does.
And so it's kind of daunting to commit to doing a full-on Spielberg series. But yeah, that's kind of what's coming up. And we are going to do a movie draft. What I might do too, this is me doing like a live on air podcast production talk. I've been thinking about splitting up the movie drafts from the like main content of the episode. So the movie draft might come out with this episode, or I might release it the next week. And that gives me more, that way I'm still like putting stuff out for you guys every week, but it also gives me more time I'm a one-man show. So,
Sure.
so it gives me more time to like make sure the podcast is well produced, gives time to like fix mistakes when stuff goes wrong with the technology. Cause I've had some moments of like panic when something was like not going right with the recording or something. And so, so probably what will be happening is my series related shows will be coming out every other week, and then I'll make sure to have something, whether it's a review or a movie draft or something coming out in between every week. So be looking forward to that. But we are going to do a shorts movie draft, short film movie draft. So either stick around and we'll be back, or wait till next Friday, and you'll get the short films movie draft. But it's been good. Since I might be releasing the movie draft later, do you want to go ahead and share right now I know Letterboxd is probably really the only place where you would care for people to follow you.
Sure.
Or like interact with people, you know.
Yeah.
Do you know what I know you're like Chase. Are you like Chables on there, or
It might be.
It's hard
That's
to
a
find.
great question.
It's really hard to find. Luckily,
yes, I am.
he's Chables.
Yes, CHABLES.
Yeah. So you can look him up on Letterboxd, follow him there. You do a lot of vlogging. You do a little bit of review every once in a while.
Every now and then.
Yeah.
I need to get better at that.
Yeah.
I need to get better at actually like writing out at least like a couple of sentences of thought on everything that I do.
It's a good habit.
Yeah.
It helps you kind of solidify your thoughts and how you felt about a movie.
I do a lot of logging, and I make a lot of lists.
Yeah.
Just randomly.
Lists are fun.
Lists are fun.
I have way too many lists.
I have so many lists.
But even if you forgot already his username, it'll be in the show notes. So just open the show notes. There'll be a link that you can click on. But yeah, that's it for our Wes Anderson. And once again, we are done with Wes Anderson. You know, that was the last Wes Anderson.
Oh, yeah.
As
True.
of now.
As of right now.
Yeah. But we do know there's another on the way. So be looking forward to that. Be looking forward to the short films movie draft. Be looking forward to my son's review of My Neighbor Totoro, and especially the Spielberg series coming up. Really excited. So I appreciate you guys listening, and we'll see you again real soon.
We were happy here. For a little while.
But look, I figure it this way. Better to be king for a night than schmuck for a lifetime.